Hey there everybody, welcome back to Painting Big. This is Anne, and today we're going to be tackling our OSL, the second stage of our underpainting. So we're going to be glazing colors over the top of our bluish and white underpainting to see if we can create a lighting effect. Alright, let's get to it. Alrighty. I painted in the flames really quick just so we have something to work with. Let's get a little closer to this guy. Alrighty, so there's our Conjurer. I've got a really fast paint job on the fiery summon, just so we can establish a color for our fire. In reality, probably if I had a little bit more time, I'd go even paler on some of this. You see I introduced some splashes of white. I probably would want to come in and do quite a bit more white. Remember, your lighting effect really needs to be the lightest, brightest thing on the model, so I'd probably take some of the thicker areas and add more white to them so that we really start to see light coming out, right? But apart from that, and remember also to always undercoat whatever is going to be your light source, make sure to paint it white first and then paint colors over the top. So before I put this yellow on, I painted all of this area white. There we go. And that makes sure that when I put down this yellow, that it is really the brightest thing that you can see. So you see even those little touches of white suddenly make it really look like it's emanating light a little bit better, apart from whether I painted the fire correctly or not. But since this is a summoned fire creature spirit thing, I don't feel like I'm constrained by physics. We always have the right to paint it how we want to. That's the joy of being a miniature painter. And pop a little bit of orange in there. All right. So we've got our underpainting here, and what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be putting kind of a heavy wash, kind of as if it's contrast paint. You guys know probably, just how you use those, but you can build that kind of effect yourself. With Master Series paint, we've already got flow improver in the formulas. You don't really need to add more. So what we want to do is I want to make his robe red. I'm choosing colors that'll go well with that pale yellow highlight. I'll talk about my light colors in a second. But what I want to do really is add water to the point where it's not a wash. You want the color to be strong, but you want to be able to see a bit through it. So working with a well palette is really good for this because you can kind of see what you've got just by kind of painting over the top. And this is a porcelain well palette, so a ceramic well palette. It's easier to clean. But you can see that you can see a little bit through this, but not a lot. So I'm going to actually put another drop in there, and then we'll talk a bit about colors. This is Blood Red of Master Series paint, by the way. One of the original reds we ever did. Good basic red. Alright, so now I'm going to put a dab over here. Okay, so now that's more like what I'm talking about. It's too thick for a wash, but it's thinner. It's thin enough that you can see through it on the palette. Because I want to be able to see my underpainting. So what I can do then is I can use one of these back sleeves and kind of do a test. I'm just going to paint it right over there. I want it to be also thick enough that it's going to cover over both the dark and the light. Now obviously, I don't want it to pool in the recesses, so I'm going to have to come back and tackle that in a second. But, so as I put that on, I'm going to grab my brush, rinse it off, and pull the water out of it so that I can get this stuff off of here. And we'll see if I've gone too far. I'm just going to pull all this excess. If I've gone too thin, we'll see it in a second. We may have wanted to go a little thicker. And sometimes it takes a little bit of trial and error. If you want, you can test this on a separate piece of paper. You could take just white and your and the whatever liner or paint color you used for the darks, and you could just put paint over it and see when you get to the point what you want. You do want to remember that when you thin a paint, it's always going to dry a little lighter than it looks. So even though this looked like it was going to have solid coverage, now we see that it's actually drying a bit more transparent. And that's fine. I can always add a little bit more blood red to this if I want to, or I can put 2 layers on when I get to this. But it's starting to look right. So yeah, my conclusion from this is that I went a little too far. Common mistake. So I'm going to add some red to that. Now, just 1 drop probably. It's a little harder to do this on a wet palette because on a wet palette's paper membrane, it's going to be wicking fluid down into the sponge, or it's going to be pushing fluid up through the paper into your paint. It's really hard to really control your viscosity. With enough practice, you absolutely can. So if you are a 100% love wet palette painter, you can learn to do this. It just takes a while. It's just at that point, it's just a learning curve. I wanted to talk a little bit about my fire colors just real quick because these are also going to be our highlight colors. So I've got candlelight yellow plus white here, so you want to use an orangier yellow. You don't want to use a really greenish yellow, so candlelight is here. Lantern yellow is another good call. When you add white to it, it goes a lot more yellow than you'd think. Either of those is fine, plus white, and then I've got my pure white, and then I've actually got a little bit of like a marigold yellow / sunrise orange color, just for to bring out the orange hints in the flame. You gotta put, if you're gonna bring definition into fire, you have to use a darker color, but I wouldn't go much darker than that if you want the fire to look, really bright. You can, if you're painting a really smoky fire, you can go into like the reds and browns and blacks and kind of colors with fire, but if you're looking for a lighting effect, putting a lot of that stuff in isn't going to give you the most convincing lighting effect. So, that said, I'm adding 1 drop of paint, and I'm happy to show you guys like the process of like the testing process here, because I mean, even I have to test it. You're not going to be perfect every time. Although once you learn, like once you're like, okay, so I started with, 5 drops of paint, I added 1 drop of water and I thought it wasn't enough, and I added 2 and it was too much. So next time you can remember, okay, a 5-to-1 is about where I want it for this. So I've added a drop of paint back in now. So we've pushed a little bit more that way. And we can also look at the dried effect, which actually is not bad. It's obviously gone a bit pink over the white, but that's all right. So I'm going to just put it on. I'm going to hope, actually. So what I'm going to do before I put this second layer on is I'm going to grab my white. I'm going to add a little bit of water to it. I'm actually going to resketch my highlight because I want that red to really show up. So I added a drop of water to my white because it was just straight up, no water added before. And I'm going to re-add just a little bit of my highlights. Just take a couple seconds. You don't have to be real precise with this. This is the super fast version of how to get an OSL effect. So we've got our light effect now. And pretty much dries right away because it's thin paint and it's warm in this room. So now I'm going to grab, again, my paint. Now it's thicker. Yeah, that looks better. Yeah, that looks a lot better. All right. So I should have kept it a little thicker in the beginning. And the key here is that when you're putting your red over this dark bluish purple color, this near black, it's going to look a lot darker, right? We all know that when we put our paints over black, it tends to stay darker. That's a lot of how black primer works, to give you kind of create shadows for you so you don't have to paint them on. So this looks all right. I'll probably have to bring up that fold, and again, I've got some paint pooling in the crevices here. So do you need to touch this up afterwards? Sure you do if you want it to look really good, but yeah, I'll have to touch that up. But you can see how it actually looks pretty good. And again, though, we're not going to leave it like this. We're going to doctor it a little. So bring my shadows in to the crease. I'm just painting in the creases. And I can paint in the creases a little bit down here too. There we go. So I've got my shadows back in. That's pretty cool. There we go. Lovely. All right, that looks actually pretty cool. Now, I'm going to do the rest of the upper robe real quick, and then we're going to talk about how we actually tune this. So we're just going to paint it right over. And I'm going to try to paint it in an even layer without making it pool too much. I don't want to have to go in and pull the color off all over the place. That would be just kind of a waste of time. So I'm going to just try to put it on in a nice even coat, more or less. And I'm not going to care if I get it a little bit onto other areas. I can always touch up with my white. Putting it on a little bit more evenly will also help where I don't have to keep pulling it out of the folds. All right, front. Contrast paint does this very, very well because of the combination of the type of base it is and the type of pigments used in it. Usually to get something like contrast paint, you want to have like a super fine pigment that's going to be actually pretty see-through, but then when you load a lot of that into a paint, you can get that cool kind of almost acrylic ink effect where it's very intense, but it's also kind of see-through. And of course, different colors of contrast paint are tuned a little bit differently depending on the pigment and what effect you're trying to get. But this is kind of like close to making your own. It's not perfect, but it's a good start. And everywhere I put the red where it's over white, you can see it's going to come up a lot lighter. And everywhere I put it over the dark, you can see it's going to be in shadow. And we're hoping that our underpainting works a little bit here, so we'll see. It might be a little too subtle down here, but it's working a little bit on the sleeve. You can see the shadow here, and you can see it coming up here. So the benefit of this then is that it kind of gives you a roadmap to go in and just spend a little extra time. If you want to spend a little extra time highlighting and shading it, you can see where you should do it because it's already showing you like where your underpainting was. You've got that underpainting still as a guide. And kind of like, this is what nobody ever tells you about Zenith priming, is that you really want to use more transparent paints over the top of it. Otherwise, you're just going to wipe it all out. You're not going to actually benefit from it. Zenith, if you are working with more transparent colors, it can serve as a roadmap of where you want to put your highlights and your shadows, right? And back here, this is so subtle, I don't know if it's really going to work. Let's find out. A lot of the time, it's where you really bring the underlying colors up to white that you're going to see the difference, and doing something like I did here with a pretty subtle underpainting. We'll see if it actually works. Sometimes it won't. Depends on the color. You can see I've got way too much bleed through in the middle of those folds. But they're in folds, right? You know they're going to be dark. So I'm going to pull most of that out, but afterwards I'll just go back and paint into those folds with my dark blue-black. But you can see how as it dries, you can see the light coming through, right? Which is pretty cool. We forgot the inside of the sleeve there. I'm going to have to go fast just because I don't want this to be forever, obviously. We're already running out of time. So, how would I tune this? Other than taking my dark blue color and reinforcing the shadows, and here I would probably go with like a 2-to-1, but you go with a little bit thinner paint here because you don't want to make big blobs with like really strong outlines. You just want to kind of paint, you want kind of a heavy wash. So there's the color. When I thin it out, that's kind of how it looks. You'll be able to see that on wet palette paper too. That's kind of how thin you want it. And then you just like can reinforce your shadows really quick, right? Maybe I want to darken down this area a little bit more. Here. All right, now, obviously we can see the light, but it's the wrong color. Because it's showing through white here, it's going pink, but our light source is actually a yellow color. So what we'll do then is we're going to take our yellow color, we're going to mix a little bit of that into our white. We're going to turn our white into our light color. So there you've got it, a really pale yellow. And that's the color that we're going to mix with our red now to make our highlight. Oh, I had water in that. Maybe I need a little more yellow. I think I do. I need it to go a little warmer. There we go. So warm it up. This is more of a peachy color. We can even go a little bit farther. The more white, the more pink you go. The more yellow, the more you're going to get kind of an orangey color. That's probably a good one. And usually I would do that. I would just mix my light color into that. And now we can kind of bring that highlight up. Now, if you want the light color to be really, really strong, then you can take that, the color of the flame, which is, you know, just this yellow. I'm going to thin it down again. I don't want it to be super strong. But if you really want the light to say this is really an overpowering light source, that's when you can do what I like to call the paint can effect, where you're actually painting the yellow itself on as a highlight, where the parts of the cloth that are closest don't even retain, you know, so much red, they actually go up to a bright yellow. So let's do that and show how it looks. I'm using my orangey color first to pick up the highlights. And then I'm going to take that yellow and really pop that up on the shoulder. And out here, close to the light. Because that red is going to change color, like so, as it gets closer. And actually, I haven't even gotten all the way up to yellow, so let's put some of that white down. There we go. So that's my white-yellow mix, just straight up onto the shoulder there. So the parts that are closest to the flame, or closest to the above, if the flame is being held up. And then you really start to see that coming up hot, right? So places down here, like the knee here, I know that it was lighter, but I'm going to keep that a little bit more dark. I'm going to do my red, and maybe I'm going to mix it a little bit with this orangey color that I made, that peachy color, and do a little bit of wet blending, because I know that the color came down to the knee here, but I know it was stronger up here. So I can do a little wet blend, have it drop off at the knee. That one may be a little bit overboard there, so it's all right. Bring my real red in. There we are. Now notice that when I put the red over that lighter color, it really gets more intense. So that's something, if you want to bring up some of these areas, if you wanted to suggest, oh, maybe there's a little bit of light down here, you can bring that pinkish color in down into there. Then grab your red, and it dries almost like right away because it's so thin. I'm only putting a touch of it on. You can get your red down here and bring your red back up a little bit brighter. See, that's coming up. And then here, if you decide you don't want it so pink, you can paint your red. Leave just a little splash of that lighter color up at the top. All right, so let's go up here. So we're just going to essentially use a mix of our light color, the yellow, and the red color that we've decided these robes are, and we're just going to work with that to create the highlights. So your highlight color on this is always going to be a mixture of your light color and the base color of what you're working with. So let's say we're dealing with the hair. I got some harvest brown just to paint on there really quick. It's it's like a kind of really intense yellowy brown for his hair. Put a little bit of water in there. We already discovered that I didn't need as much water as I thought. So you can get into trouble when you're using really yellow colors over an underpainting that's like got a lot of black in it like this, because it can go kind of greenish. So if you're planning on doing a lot of yellowish tones, then you might want to do a dark brown underpaint with your white instead of like this bluish color or something else. But you can see how the hair is definitely a little bit more vibrant where it was white, and back here it's definitely, as it dries, it's showing a dull color. So then again, to create a highlight with this, we take our brown and we grab a bit of our yellow and a little bit of our white. And that creates a highlight color for the hair right under the flame. So I'll focus on putting that right up at the top And at first I'm just going to really just, I always like save the hair strands, the picking out of the hair strands for the end of what I do. As far as textures, I'm always doing them on the last step. So I'm going to bring this lighter color up there so you can see how that really picks up. I can even bring in more yellow and white. To bring it up even more and really start to see the light there. So the light is really hitting there. It would hit down here on his chin. A little bit there. You know, you could bring in some strands, pick a few strands out like so. This is very rough because I'm having to go very fast, but you guys get the idea, right? That's how you bring up colors. I went a little, it came out a bit more yellow up here just because his hair is already kind of a yellowy golden orange, golden brown. The skin tones is where you might need to exercise some like artistic license, sometimes putting a skin tone over, especially if you're using a blue undertone like this. It can be kind of fraught. But you mix highlights exactly the same way. So here I'm using Swarthy Flesh from MSP just because it's a darker skin tone. I figured that would work better. Already painting over my mustache. As you can see, taking your time with this instead of trying to rush it in the middle of a video gives you the best results. Y'all know I'm a better painter than this, right? So I actually pulled some of that back and so we could see the shadow. It was a little thick the way I put the paint on, but you can see the shadows still on the skin. And then I would take my yellow and white and I'd mix those with the skin tone a little bit. And then I'd bring those highlights in where the light is stronger. Nose, the eyebrows, the top of the cheek. That's where light tends to be stronger. So you can see it coming. And if I really want, because skin has a little bit of a shine to it, thanks to our oils in our skin, I can actually take like very close to the light, like actually take the yellow, use it for a high highlight up here. Really small touches. You don't want to paint the whole face yellow. And the higher you bring that, the lighter you bring that, the more the light is going to show up. Understand that. The lighter you highlight, the more you push up your highlights, the more that effect is going to carry. So examples of this that I've actually, let's just paint a little bit. But Snake is a great one. She's one of the original ones that I did in this kind of style with this kind of over and underpainting. I'm going to take our peachy color over here. Now a little bit of actual yellow. So yeah, I will use the actual yellow to highlight parts that are really close to the top, because then you can see that color in the cloth, and your brain automatically draws a connection between this and that. I'm going to bring in some of my brighter reds just along the periphery here. Not technically proper, like as far as scientific light theory to do that, but can look cool. Just intensifying my reds there along that border. But you can see how using that undermapping, that underpainting as a map, it's very easy to put in quick highlights that end up looking really cool, and it's in line, like it looks right as far as the light sourcing. So hopefully that was instructive. I know I can't do these videos, can't make these videos all that long. As it is, we've gone way over on this one. Hopefully it's still a good foundation for you to kind of understand what we're getting at with this technique. We're trying to give you a good source so that you can see through what we've done before where you should put your highlights, and you just add in that light color and brighten them up. And you can do it pretty fast, all things considered. If you have the time to spend, you can take this and make it into something really cool looking, right? So, thanks everybody. We're going to be upping our production of videos in the coming months, so hopefully you guys will enjoy it. I just decided I was going to make a run for partner. I'll be putting out a video about my goals soon on this channel. And kind of what you guys can expect going forward. So thanks for riding along. I appreciate all of you, and I'll be back soon. This is Anne signing off.